Welcome.
Thank you.
We're slowly getting the students lunch, so they will coming in here. So we'll start in a couple minutes.
Okay, great.
All right, we'll go ahead and kick things off with the second Bizzell Business of Healthcare lecture series, number 2 for the spring. Be honest, glad so many of you are able to come out. We had a great number of attendees. We probably have in the room here have about 70 to 80 people.
Great.
And what we've been able to see over the years is that that there's a growing interest in our pharmacy student body for careers in the business of healthcare, and clearly pharmaceutical industry really drives and leads that. And so we're really excited about the students' interest in that space. And because of that, we are continuing to provide opportunities for them to learn about the business of healthcare, as well as to engage with our alumni through some of these involvements. Kay Uttech got her BS in pharmacy from the University of Wisconsin, but came down to UNC for her post-baccalaureate PharmD. And if you look at her career, she's had a variety of different positions across the pharmaceutical industry, starting out at Novo Nordisk, but spent a long time at Baxter, and has, as I understand, relocated to the Charlotte market recently.
Yeah.
And currently working, and then maybe you'll explain some of that. So I don't want to sort of describe sort of too much more, but we're very excited and very happy that you're able to join us. So Kay, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Dr. Eckel. I did want to put my face up on the screen. I don't know if we're going to go split screen or not, but I wanted everybody to see me before I went ahead and presented slides today. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. I do have a few things that I think I'll maybe help kind of share what it is I do in the industry and help you understand a little bit more, because what I do today didn't exist when I went to school. So I really wanted to provide you with some food for thought for the future. I know I entitled this originally Future Ready Healthcare, which I still believe is a huge driving force in the work that I do. But as I prepared this talk, I kind of gave this the subtitle of what a long, strange trip it's been, because there's been a lot of twists and turns in the road. And I did kind of want to talk through that and talk through, what I've seen as the benefits and how I've also kind of seized upon opportunities as I've gone along in my career. What's a good talk without a little bit of self-deprecation? This is my graduating class from UNC, all 15 of us. And as far as I know, actually 3 of the 15 of us went into the pharmaceutical or medical device industry in our career. So, it's not beyond the possibilities. I think that you are very well positioned as a pharmacist for a number of reasons. I think pharmacists are prepared to work cross-functionally and collaboratively. I think it's built into our DNA. And that's extraordinarily important in the industry. So, make sure you're leveraging those skills and make sure that you're applying that ability that you have to understand, what work is going on elsewhere so that you can effectively communicate and coordinate with those groups. My career kind of looks like this. You've already heard I graduated from the University of Wisconsin, then came to UNC. I did a fellowship that was in coordination with East Carolina University and UNC in geriatrics. I was a senior research fellow at Duke in the Center for Aging and Human Development following my geriatrics fellowship. So there I worked on research for the National Institute on Aging for about 3 years. Following that, we had done a number of submissions for additional grants. We didn't get funded. I ended up kind of gravitating back to where my family is in the Midwest, and I became a faculty member at the University of Illinois, Chicago, Colleges of Medicine and Pharmacy. I did that for a few years. So you can see that first part, there were a lot of changes going on early in my career to gain experience, to kind of expand upon the way that I was working. And then I made the transition from a faculty member and a clinic-based pharmacist where I was teaching in the classroom and teaching students in the clinic to actually transitioning over to becoming a medical science liaison at Novo Nordisk. I worked my way through the ranks until I was managing that team nationally and actually leveraged a lot of what I had done in my academic career to both educate my colleagues on the medical science liaison team, but also effectively manage my interactions with healthcare professionals as a medical science liaison. I things didn't necessarily turn out with our product the way we expected. We expected significant expansion of the label, and we had done a lot of different, let's say, research that was investigator-initiated studies to see if we could get another concept for label expansion to really pan out. And it didn't pan out as we would have expected to get additional indications from the FDA. So I ended up transitioning onto another role at Baxter Healthcare and actually working with the previous colleague. I will tell you one thing, you think pharmacy is a very small community. The industry is even a smaller community. So a colleague of mine actually asked me to come back and work with him to start the first medical science liaison team in the biosurgery space at Baxter Healthcare. Much of the work that we had done in Novo Nordisk was dealing with trauma surgeons, gastrointestinal surgeons, neurosurgeons. And so in my hospital career, I had actually worked in the surgical suites and post-operative care. And so I was able to leverage some of my previous experiences in bringing that to the role at Baxter. I worked on this biosurgery team, built a team also in immunology, which was completely a new therapeutic space for me, and worked with a colleague to develop a team in hemophilia as well. We went through some organizational changes at Baxter, and instead of having all of the medical science liaison in a central organized structure, we transitioned to have them decentralized. And I was tapped on the shoulder to take on responsibilities to bring together all of our medical information globally for Baxter. So I had to work with colleagues all around the world to try to create content that we could then reuse and repurpose in different areas of the world and make sure that it was aligned to the regulatory environment. So a big task. And I was also initially informed by my boss that I wasn't getting any additional resources to do that. So I think sometimes you get thrown in the deep end of the pool and you kind of have to figure out how things work and how you're going to get people to partner together. And that was a real growth experience for me at Baxter. That actually led to some other opportunities that I had for taking on a role for continuous improvement and accountability at Baxter, where I was one of 6 global leaders, and my focus was on the R&D organization. And that also led to someone approaching me for a role as Baxter spun off a small company called Bizzell. And there I reported in directly to the CEO and was responsible for implementing the new governance model in the spin-off company. So some of the work that I did gave me a much better perspective of how the business of the company worked and how my cross-functional partners worked, but maybe was a little bit removed from pharmacy and medicine. And I wanted to gravitate back to that. So after we were acquired by Shire, I went into consulting for a few years where I worked with small to mid-sized companies, helping them design and stand up their medical affairs organizations. And now working at Indegene, I really focus specifically on medical affairs organizations and how to improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and the delivery of scientific exchange by companies. So just to kind of tell you a little bit about what really enticed me about coming to a place like Indegene was its application of digital technologies to really transform the life science industry. So, we not only work to create the content that people use to communicate, but we also in the background make sure that we're paying attention to how do our customers use content? How do they prefer to use content? How do they prefer to, access content? Do they need it on demand? Do they want someone to respond to them? Do they want to be able to talk to a real person? So by applying those analytics in the background, we can really give them the best customer experience. The right-hand side just kind of gives you an idea of the types of companies that we work with. And so, we work with a vast array of companies across the continuum and in different stages in terms of their development and launch of products. And Indegene covers across the spectrum, everything from research and clinical research and development on through to the commercialization of products. We work with clients. So the three primary pieces of our business, though, are the medical piece where I work, where we, really help companies communicate effectively the science and educate healthcare professionals. As I said, we have a research and development arm that really works on how do you establish your clinical trials and ensure the right patients get connected with your clinical trials, and making sure that we're applying technology to be able to find those patients, to get them connected with trials. And then the commercial piece of the industry, which is sales, marketing, market access, and making sure that that is available to both healthcare professionals and patients as they make decisions about their healthcare. Indegene also is a global company, so certainly there are smaller companies that are only US focused, but I would say today the vast majority of companies are either global as they start, or they have an intention to globalize the release of the products that they're developing. And so Indegene has 15 offices around the world. Our US headquarters, I happen to be in it today. I'm in Princeton, New Jersey, but we also have offices in the UK, in Ireland, in London. Our primary headquarters is in Bangalore, India, but we also have sites in Guadalajara, Mexico, and so we're able to actually follow the sun with all of our clients to be able to help support them in the delivery of the services that they need for the people who are their customers. We have a very broad array of expertise inside the company. I know it says more than 4,000 FTEs or full-time equivalents inside the company. We're actually almost 5,000 people. About a third of those are individuals who have PharmDs, PhDs, or MDs. And so we have a very high focus on ensuring that we have that scientific integrity and expertise in the way that we deliver our services. The healthcare industry has changed significantly over the last 10 years, but certainly that's even accelerated further during the last couple of years. We know that we've been developing these increasingly complex and very personalized or individualized types of therapies where genomics is necessary to ensure that the patient gets connected with the right type of therapy for their condition. We know that, many times these therapies, it used to be you could go home, you could take a pill, and that was it. Some therapies now require infusion. Some therapies require that patients are doing home-based injections. So, we need to be able to get that information out, not only to the healthcare professionals, but ensuring that patients have the information they need as well. Along with that, the healthcare professionals themselves have become very digitally savvy. They've become very connected to how they need information, the fact that information now is very instantaneous. They're used to experiences like those that they have with Netflix or Amazon, and honestly are beginning to demand that same type of experience when they connect with other types of industries and service providers. So they want to be able to access information that is scientifically sound and fair balanced, and is educational in nature. Physicians more and more today are less likely to see a sales representative who's going to come in and provide promotional communication to them, and instead they really want to be educated. So it's really put medical affairs in a place where it has become a very strong strategic partner inside the industry. Along with this kind of individualization of therapies, in order to drive the experience that physicians have, we also need to pay attention to how do they like to consume information. And we can do that with all of the metadata that's being collected in the background. And this was one of the things that I found really fascinating in terms of Indegene is in working with our customers, we want to help utilize and leverage that data so that we can give physicians an experience that one responds to their specific question, because traditionally in the industry, we kind of created standard responses and it may or may not respond to the type of question that physician is having. And we just tried to plug a square peg into a round hole. And we said, well, that's good enough. Well, now we really want to structure the types of responses that we're providing to physicians specific to the types of requests for information that they have. And we want to make their experience, regardless if, they got an email and now they went to our website, how do we make it a very seamless experience for them so that, they don't have to go, okay, where was that email I got? How do I get back to that information? There needs to be that ability, that kind of almost digital file cabinet where physicians can access that information that they've already seen before, or that we as companies in the industry can continue to help bring forward that conversation with healthcare professionals. So I've talked a little bit already about this vital role that medical affairs plays, but it is ever increasing. I honestly see, I know I looked about 2 weeks ago and I saw more than 100 postings for medical science liaison roles and other medical affairs types roles. But the reason it's increasing is because now the expectation is that we'll have more frequent communications occurring through the medical team rather than the commercial team with healthcare professionals. So the speed and the volume of the types of scientific content that's being created creates this basically endless demand for information. Also, the audience for receiving this information is expanding as well. So it used to be that companies really focused on what they considered key opinion leaders. So physicians who were very influential in their decision making. Well, the challenge is we found out now that physicians are actually more interested in getting this fair and balanced information from the industry, so long as it is provided by competent medical professionals and that it maintains that level of fair balance. So not only are they connecting now with these key opinion leaders, but perhaps even the physician network that refers into these key opinion leaders, and then also ensuring that the companies can help facilitate the communication that physicians and other healthcare professionals are having with the patients who are receiving care or making decisions about care. Also, these types of communications now are coming in more and more and more formats. So how do you make materials that can be adapted readily between these different formats, whether it's your laptop or the web or an interactive physician portal or your mobile phone? And in different regions of the world, physicians utilize different types of devices in different ways to gather their information. This is just kind of a very high level overview to share with you the types of things in medical affairs that are the primary activities. And these are the types of work that we do at Indegene. So with strategy and consulting, that's really about helping companies kind of solve some of the challenges or problems that they have. We can come in, look at processes, look at their established digital platforms and help them be able to better identify what steps they need to take to move forward, as well as the change management that they need to enact with their teams in order to make these kinds of changes. But the real kind of heart of our work is focused on material review, which is a process in which, content is created, and anytime a company shares content with the outside world, they need to make sure of a few things. One, does it align with what our style requirements are inside the company? Is it medically, clinically, and technically correct? So, do all the references line up with everything that we've said? Are we making statements that have supported claims in the literature? So, all of that is very highly regulated, and the FDA can come back and create significant fines for companies if they're making claims that are not substantiated by data. So it's really important that companies, take the time to ensure that they have this kind of claims database, as well as having a significant way and a very rigorous process to review any content that's going to be shared externally. We also do medical information. So that's like the creation of content that might be shared through a medical information call center or a medical information website, and making sure that individuals in a call center are capable of answering those questions and have access to that information through digital search capabilities at a moment's notice, so that those individuals who are calling into a call center or accessing a chatbot online are able to get the information that they need in an expedient way. We also do medical communications, everything from creation of manuscripts, abstracts, and posters from primary research, all the way through to creating other types of content like dossiers, which can summarize a whole body of evidence around a product, as well as the health economics and outcomes research. So these dossiers are commonly used with payer organizations to get them to include a product on a formulary. Also, it can be other things like infographics. It can be brochures, slide decks that might be used with the MSLs. All of these are different types of medical publications or communications that can be utilized. Indegene also does learning and development. So many times the focus of our learning development is helping to train new members to the team, whether it be the medical team or the commercial team, and then applying adult learning principles to ensure that we're developing the content in a way that helps adult learners effectively learn. But we also apply some really unique strategies that I'll talk about in a few minutes when I show you, at least some still examples of the type of work we do for medical communications and learning and development. We also work with field medical science liaison teams. So we will staff and develop medical science liaison teams, generally for small companies, or maybe in a time where a company expects that they'll have a significant increase in the amount of inquiries or physicians that they'll have to work with. We also work to ensure that medical science liaisons can effectively engage with physicians in the virtual environment. So we have a platform where they can share slides and gather the conversation that they've had with the physicians in a very efficient and effective virtual environment. And then also ensuring that the team is prepared to do the work that they need to do, that they know how to plan their engagements in the field, and also, how they're going to communicate effectively with healthcare professionals. And then last but not least is, health economics and outcomes research. So, part of that is real world evidence and being able to look for data sources that can be leveraged by the company and prepared after a product is approved to help build the evidence behind the use of that product. But it's also ensuring that, we have a way to communicate that and get publications out about that real world evidence. So that just kind of gives you an overview of the types of work that we do at Indegene. So, one of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure as a student you recognize this, is, how do you take all of this data and it used to be the data doubled, maybe once every 50 years, I think it was in about 1952. In 1974, data in the medical space was doubling about every 5 years. In the late 1980s, it was doubling about every 2.5 years. And the challenge is, pre-COVID, it was doubling about every 74 or 75 days. And actually, during the time of COVID, medical information and publication was doubling at a rate of about every 45 days. So as you can imagine, it's very difficult for companies to keep up with what is somebody else publishing about our competitor products, about our product, what's going out. So being able to apply things like artificial intelligence to do the searches for that literature and identification of that content in the primary literature is really important, because once we identify those gaps, we can actually have the human focus in on those gaps to be able to identify, okay, is this something we already know and perhaps this phrasing is slightly different, or is this an issue we really need to address? So we can bring in all kinds of new data sources to be able to apply artificial intelligence to. We can also apply artificial intelligence to other things like, is the style of this document that's created for the company aligned with what their style guide is? Does it follow the format and rules? Are there grammatical errors or errors in spelling of medical terminology? We can actually have the machine do that type of editorial and proofreading work so that the human can really focus on, is this clinically relevant? Does it make sense? These are very, very qualified individuals, and we want to make sure that we're actually leveraging their time for the capabilities where their expertise and their insight in terms of strategy can be most helpful. Also, we are working currently with an organization that's kind of a consortium in the industry called FactMI to take primary literature and actually meta tag pieces of primary literature and pull that data into documents so that we can actually have the machine generate a first draft of a document, so that that information is automatically linked to the references in that document. And then the human can really focus their effort again on, does this make sense clinically? They don't have to spend as much time double checking, does this reference fit here? Does this reference fit here? We can also use artificial intelligence to compare two versions of a document. So let's say someone reviewed it and they made a bunch of changes. The machine can actually look and see which changes have been made in the document. And it can kind of say, okay, yes, that one was done. No, that one wasn't done. And then the human knows where to focus their energy about the kinds of changes and recommendations that were made in terms of editing that content. So we can apply natural language processing and artificial intelligence in a variety of different ways. This, I think, for me, was one of the really fascinating things about the work that I do today, that I don't even know if I really ever considered, because it requires that understanding of the scientific and clinical context, but also brings the application of technology into the work. I did want to provide just kind of some high level examples. So, on the left-hand side, you might start with a primary piece of literature that the company creates based on a clinical trial that they do. Again, like I said, we need to create it in a variety of different ways, or at least in flexible formats that can be utilized on any kind of device so that physicians have optimal access to that information. So it might be like a slide deck, it might be a poster, it might be something that's more of an infographic that describes the information to them, or it might be, a few summary pieces about the data that's available, so that can be readily shared with the healthcare professionals. Other types of work that we do, just to kind of give you an idea of the types of things that we do at Indegene, I talked a lot about both content creation from medical publications, but we also do a lot of training. So we'll create physician portals like this down in the far right-hand corner, where physicians can come in, access accredited medical education, access publications, access other kinds of materials that they can then utilize. We've even done programs where we work with professional organizations to accredit healthcare professionals in certain capabilities. Maybe they're building skills in diabetes care or something like that. We also do kind of independent modules for training. We'll do things that tell a story through things like infographics or kind of interactive types of videos or mechanism of action videos. And you need to be able to apply the science to all of this type of work. Also, sometimes the education is focused on patient experience and making sure that patients are well educated about both the care of their disease state, but also many times, diagnosis and treatment of their disease state. So I know we have about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes left. I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time to talk, but I did want to give you kind of some perspective about the types of things that we're doing. We also are in the process of developing education and training in the metaverse. So for those of you who are not as familiar with the metaverse, but it's a way of engagement in a virtual space, but where it used to be with virtual reality, where it was one person there by themselves. Now in the metaverse, you can actually have a social interaction with other people who are located in other places, but actually have that type of real world interaction in the metaverse. So it's actually socially engaging. One of the first examples we're working on is training for a sales team so that they actually go to a physician's office in the metaverse and meet with a physician. And then all the things that can happen in a physician office are happening at the same time that they're meeting with the physician. So it impacts much like their real world experience in a training situation. So that's all I have for today. I'm going to stop sharing and open the floor up to questions. Did I overwhelm everyone?
I have one. When you mentioned the metaverse, do you see that becoming a way that companies could potentially work together globally instead of, like right now I know people are using Zoom or they might, have to travel. Do you see that being something that they would like kind of adapt?
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody who leads our learning and development team, she already is running meetings in the metaverse. So they have interactive space in the metaverse where they can meet.
I guess I have a question too. You've had a lot of positions and you've done a lot of very different things, but is there anything that you remember from your pharmacy education that you felt was really important moving into all of these roles?
So, I would, well, and I can tell you a couple of gaps that I had for sure. We didn't get a lot of business education when I was in pharmacy school. When I was in pharmacy school, you were going to become a community pharmacist or a hospital pharmacist. That was primarily what the options were. So my business education, I kind of had to take by the School of Hard Knocks. So congratulations for all of you for having some business education and being able to gain insight as to what's out there. I would not, my therapeutics type education, I think has been very important both in the beginning of my career, but I have also been a lifelong learner. So I have, maintained things like a board certification as a pharmacotherapy specialist, despite the fact that I'm not necessarily in direct patient care at this point in time. So I think maintaining that understanding of the developing therapeutics in this across the industry and across clinical practice is important for the work that I do. I do also think in the work that I do, it did help to have an initial part of my career that had clinical experience in it. Although I know, sometimes it can be a bit more challenging to show how your clinical experience pertains to work that's done in the industry. But I do think being able to understand what that experience is for the physician and at the patient bedside is really essential for being able to effectively work in the industry, because sometimes the thing that gets missed is the fact that, a product is created, but people don't really think about how it's used at the end. I will tell you, in the last 5 years, patient centricity has increased exponentially in the industry. So people are thinking more like that. So again, I think it's a place that pharmacists really provide an added benefit in understanding, what it's like for this patient in their experience. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So you
Hi, I
mentioned,
had a question. My name is Tatiana Hines, and I'm a PY3. So thank you so much for your presentation today. I was interested specifically when you were talking about the current adoption of the metaverse in pharma. And I recently, well, last year went to the DIA conference, and they stated that there's like a new shift in digitalization. So I was wondering, are there any other projects that your company is working towards to advance towards digitalization, or kind of what you've seen in pharma so far?
Yeah, I mean, we're all focused on the implementation of technology to do the work. So, as an example, I told you we're already applying AI and machine learning to the work that's done both in medical affairs, but we also do it in commercial. Although I know less about what the commercial organization is doing, I can speak at a high level. But absolutely, I think the challenge is that companies need to move faster with the types of launches that they're doing. And they're not going to get a lot of additional resources to be able to deliver products through their launch. So people are going to need to be more agile to shift from one responsibility to another. And it's expensive for companies to build this kind of technology internally. So it makes more sense for them to go out and purchase technology and learn from organizations that focus on technology in order to kind of stay on that cutting edge. So, man, everything we do today in the work at Indegene, we apply technological tools to. So, I've talked about simplification of the material review and content creation. We're applying digital technology to all of that.
so this is kind of a shift, more talking about your career path journey. I think you mentioned when you were at Novo Nordisk as a MSL that your drug didn't pan out the way that you wanted it to. And I know, like, obviously clinical development is very expensive, and then can result in when there's loss in that area and like job cuts and stuff. How do you prepare for things like that, which are kind of out of your control?
So one thing that's certain in the industry is that expect change. so, don't expect that things will always be static. So I think that flexibility and adaptability is an important skill set to have. If you're not that kind of person, the industry might not be the right kind of place for you. How do you prepare for it? So first and foremost, I think you need to, in your job, perform and be a good business partner. So I talked about the fact about collaboration, reaching across the aisle. You need to be seen by the people that you work with as that kind of team member. I think second to that, it's important to create your networks, both inside your company and outside your company. So if you're in the industry, you need to think about, I don't know, volunteering for professional organizations so other people get to know you, making sure that you're making the effort to go to meetings of professional organizations so that you can create your network and people know the value of the work that you do. So always create your network before you ever need it. Always be prepared to give first before you receive. So I think it's always a challenge when people are kind of in dire straits and they come to you and say, I need your help. But one, you don't know anything about their work and you haven't been in contact in a while or whatever. So I think being diligent about your network is probably the next most important thing. And then, it depends on who you are and how you react. I think back to the book, Who Moved My Cheese? I don't know if you guys have ever read this, but it's all about change. And so if you want to pick up a really quick little read, it's called Who Moved My Cheese? And it talks about how people react in situations of change. And, you kind of need to know yourself and how you react. Are you going to be somebody who takes a knee-jerk reaction and jumps companies? Are you going to ride it out? Are you going to kind of thoughtfully evaluate and move forward slowly before you make a change? Or are you going to sit and wait for something to happen to you? So knowing a little bit more about yourself and how you react to those things can help you prepare a little bit better as well. I hope that answered your question. I mean, you're never going, believe me, it never comes at, usually you know something about it, but it still can come as a bit of a surprise. And believe me, there's tons of surprises in this industry. So nothing is ever completely clear cut.
Yes, that does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Dr. Uttech? I do want to follow up on some of these career discussions, and you've had experience in both big pharma and small startup companies. And can you describe a little bit about the pluses and minuses of sort of one or the other?
Yeah. So big pharma tends to be better resourced. There's usually more, dedicated resources to things like training and development, which is all great. But sometimes you kind of get lost in the shuffle. So it can, if you're not going to go out there and kind of create the opportunities for yourself or connect with the people, you can kind of become a number. And your work may go a bit unrecognized and you may be told to just stay in your lane. You can overcome that, but it does take work, especially, depending on what kind of management style is above you. People may just say you need to stay in your lane, and it may be more challenging to kind of break out of the mold. In a small company, you get more opportunity to wear different hats, work with different people across functional areas, which can be really exciting, but it also can be a lot of work. I mean, the hours might be long. You may have very broad responsibilities, but you can get involved with a lot of things and get very broad exposure and experience in a short period of time. So, and I would say smaller companies tend to be resourced in a significantly less way. So like small biotechs are always struggling to find the money to do what they need to do. It's very rare that, they have a windfall and they have plenty of money to do everything. They have to really prioritize what they're going to do. But they can be a great place to learn as well. I hope that, I think that gives you a high level perspective about what each is like.
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly what I've heard. And just for the sort of students, she made a comment, you might have picked up on it, that she looked at job ads for medical science liaisons and saw about 100 or so out there. In my experience in the last year, I know more and more hospital pharmacists that have been leaving practice and joining sort of pharmaceutical industry. So even if you see yourself going into hospital pharmacy practice, it doesn't mean that in the future you wouldn't make that transition, because whether the pandemic or other opportunities, but they are gobbling up pharmacists right now with very attractive offers, and so that's only going to reverberate through the industry, because now there's a lot of vacancies on the hospital pharmacy side. So it's a real dynamic that she mentioned.
Yeah, well, and Dr. Eckel, I actually took my clinical experience. So my first role with Novo Nordisk was on a drug that was used for hemophilia with inhibitors. And I had done a lot of work in anticoagulation. So I knew coagulation and the coagulation cascade, and the work that I had done at Duke on the research grant for the National Institute on Aging. I was actually the intervention with physicians to help improve the therapies of veterans with polypharmacy and multiple disease states. So I was able to leverage that experience of consulting directly with physicians, almost in a situation where I was counter detailing with them, and show how that skill set and my understanding of the coagulation cascade applied to the medical science liaison role that I was seeking.
Yeah, and that's where I've sort of thought about it. It's not a, when people come to you, what do you want to do after you finish pharmacy school? It's not a binary answer of I'm going to do this and that's what I'm going to do. There's growing number of examples that people sort of move between the two, and so then the question becomes, how do I prepare myself so I'm best educated, best prepared to do that? So she had a fellowship, she had clinical practice, she was able to sort of pull through that, and that gave her the standing for those opportunities. And then as she got in the industry, she moved sometimes more business oriented, when I heard her sort of describe some of that. And so then you just take those experiences and build upon that.
Yeah, and I think the other piece to that is, think about your skills and how they apply to what you're seeking. Sometimes you have to be the person who's your own storyteller and help other people be able to see that, how those things are connected.
Well, thank you very much. Enjoy Princeton, New Jersey.
Thank you. Thanks,
And
everyone. It was a pleasure speaking to you all.
yeah, thank you very much.
Bye.
And so we'll be back in a couple weeks for our next lecture, Business of Healthcare lecture series. So we'll be getting the email out, and tell your friends if they want to come and missed out on it.
If y'all could look around and see if you see any keys, someone left them. So if there's any keys that aren't yours and they happen to be there, thank you. I don't know. Hello.